The coffee shop hummed with quiet conversation, punctuated by the hiss of steaming milk. Frost laced the windows, blurring the city outside, painted in shades of grey and gold. Inside, Natalie Rowan sat tucked away near the back. One eye lingered on the door, the other on her phone. She wasn't sure if she was early or if he was late. Truthfully, Natalie hadn't wanted to come at all. Blind dates were never her thing, not after everything she'd been through. But Claire, her best friend, was relentless. "You've built an empire," Claire had said, "but you're still hiding." Natalie had scoffed at that, but Claire had a way of wearing people down. And now here she was, coat pulled close, defenses knotted tight. She hadn't even planned to bring Sophie, but the sitter cancelled last minute. Cancelling the date herself felt like admitting defeat, so she'd taken her 6-year-old along. Sophie, all wide eyes and endless curiosity, sat beside her sipping cocoa, a chocolate mustache clinging to her lip. Her little legs swung off the chair, not quite reaching the floor. Natalie checked her phone again. A message blinked back at her sent half an hour earlier, while she was still driving. "Hey, I'm so sorry. Something came up. Can we reschedule?" Her jaw tightened. Of course. She slipped the phone into her bag and sighed. "Come on, sweetheart. We're leaving." But Sophie was no longer by her side, heart skipping. Natalie scanned the cafe and spotted her daughter halfway across the room. Sophie had scrambled onto the lap of a man sitting alone by the window. He wore worn jeans, a heavy jacket, and scuffed boots. He didn't look like someone waiting for a date, more like someone who belonged to the rhythm of this place. "Sophie." Natalie hurried forward, but her daughter was already wrapped around the man's neck, like he was family. "Uncle Eli." "Sophie, CHIRPED." The man chuckled, startled, but not displeased. He glanced up as Natalie approached, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry," he said softly, gently lifting Sophie down. "She saw me and ran over before I could stop her." Natalie froze. Recognition clicked. "You're the janitor at my building?" Eli Mercer nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am." Sophie tugged on her coat. "Mom, this is Uncle Eli. He always fixes the squeaky door, and when I spilled juice, he gave me a tissue. He's really nice." Natalie stared, caught off guard. She'd passed him in the lobby countless times, mop in hand, cart in tow, but never really looked at him. Not like this. Eli rose, offering her a small, steady smile. "You looked like you were waiting for someone. I don't want to intrude." Natalie hesitated. The man she was supposed to meet had vanished, but her daughter clung to this janitor as though he were family. And for the first time in a long time, she felt unexpectedly curious about the calm-voiced man with the quiet presence. Eli gestured to the empty chairs. "You're welcome to sit. I was just finishing my coffee," Natalie murmured, hesitating. But Sophie tugged on her hand, her blue eyes shining. "Please, Mummy, I want to sit with Uncle Eli." Natalie met her daughter's gaze so open, so trusting, and let out a soft sigh. Slowly, she set her bag down and slid into the chair. The three of them fell into an easy, unexpected rhythm. Eli didn't talk much, but when he did, his dry humor made Sophie giggle uncontrollably. He listened when Natalie spoke, never interrupting, asking questions that felt genuine rather than polite. Natalie surprised herself by laughing, really laughing for the first time in a long while. The conversation stayed light. Eli mentioned he'd worked other jobs before this one, though he didn't elaborate. Natalie didn't press, and when he spoke to Sophie, he crouched to her level, never talking down to her, just present. As the afternoon waned, sunlight spilled through the cafe windows in shades of amber. Sophie cradled her cocoa, watching them both with a quiet seriousness. "Mummy," she said softly, "you're always sad, but Uncle Eli makes people laugh. Can he make you laugh too?" Natalie froze, heat rising to her cheeks at her daughter's bluntness. Eli glanced down, a small, sheepish smile tugging at his lips. Natalie had no words, but maybe she didn't need any. For the first time in a long while, she didn't want to leave, and that realization scared her more than anything. After the unexpected coffee shop encounter, Natalie tried to slip back into her routine, meetings, phone calls, late nights, but something had shifted. Eli Mercer, the janitor she had barely noticed before, kept finding his way into her thoughts. Not because he was charming in the obvious, polished way she was used to, but because of the quiet things that lingered. His deep, steady voice, the weight of his gaze, carrying more stories than he ever shared. The way he could make Sophie laugh with the smallest effort, and Sophie wouldn't stop talking about him. "Uncle." Eli says squirrels don't really remember where they hide their nuts, they just pretend. She giggled. Uncle Eli told me his favorite smell is rain on concrete. Isn't that funny, Mummy? Can we bring him cookies tomorrow? Please. It wasn't the fleeting fascination of a child. There was something real in the way Sophie spoke about him. Something rare. Natalie had always warned her daughter to be cautious with strangers. But maybe she had overlooked someone who wasn't a stranger at all. At work, she started noticing things she had never seen before. Eli never sought attention. He moved through the hallways like part of the building itself. Quiet, efficient, easy to miss unless you chose to see him. And now she did. She noticed the loose door handle in the break room that he fixed without anyone asking. The burnt-out bulbs in the hallway he replaced before complaints could pile up. The stack of reports dropped outside the legal department that he quietly returned to the desk, without a word or a name attached. It was the kind of presence that didn't demand to be shown but deserved to be. One morning, Natalie noticed a small square of chocolate sitting at the front desk. Lisa, the receptionist, clutched it like a priceless gift. "I was crying here last night," Lisa whispered when Natalie asked. "After everyone left, my fiancé broke off our engagement. This morning, I found this note. Just this." Natalie didn't need to ask who had left it. Later that week, something else happened, something that shifted Natalie's world a little further. Rain drenched the city, the kind that blurred everything into watercolor streaks of gray. Natalie picked Sophie up from the lobby after an early school dismissal. Her daughter had spent most of the day at the office, happily sketching in the kids' corner while Natalie worked. But when they got home that evening, Natalie froze. Sophie's silver charm bracelet was missing, the one her grandmother had given her, the one with her mother's initials engraved. Her chest tightened with panic. She called the office. Security searched. She retraced every step. Nothing. 2 days later, Natalie arrived at work, weary and resigned. Lisa greeted her with a quiet smile. "There's something for you," Lisa said, handing over a folded napkin. Inside lay Sophie's bracelet, clean, dry, carefully wrapped, and beneath the silver rested a small ballpoint sketch drawn directly on the napkin. A tiny heart with a smiling face inside. Natalie stood frozen, breath catching. It wasn't just the bracelet. It was the care, the thought that struck her deepest. Eli had found it in a rain-soaked parking lot. He had taken the time to wipe it clean, to protect it, to return it, not just intact, but with a message. Not a grand gesture, not diamonds, not extravagance, a napkin with a heart. And somehow, that moved her more than anything ever had. That evening, Natalie caught sight of Eli in the back hallway, replacing a flickering bulb. He didn't notice her at first. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than she expected. Eli turned, puzzled. For what? She lifted the bracelet in her hand. For this and the heart. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Humble, kind. Sophie's too special to lose something that matters to her. Natalie didn't know how to answer. She only knew she had started noticing the sound of his footsteps. She had started noticing when he wasn't around. And lately, she had found herself waiting for mornings, just to see if he would be there. The call came just after noon. Natalie was deep in a product development meeting when her phone buzzed. One glance at the screen made her heart seize. A message from Sophie's school. "Your daughter fell." The message from Sophie's school had been clear. Mild bump to the head. "She's okay. We just wanted to let you know." But Natalie was already on her feet before the meeting ended. Her driver sped through the streets while dread coiled in her chest. The last time she had rushed to a hospital, her whole world had fallen apart. Her body remembered the panic too well when she arrived at the school's small health office. She braced herself for a nurse and a tear-streaked child. Instead, what she found stopped her cold. Through the half-open door, Sophie lay curled on a padded cot, her tiny hand clasped firmly around a larger, calloused one. Eli sat beside her, shoulders slightly hunched, the other hand gently pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. He was murmuring something low, steady, reassuring. Natalie couldn't hear the words, but Sophie was smiling, eyes heavy with drowsy trust. Natalie froze in place. She didn't know what pierced her deeper, the fact that Eli had gotten there before she had, or the way he was looking at her daughter, not with pity, not with the distracted kindness of a stranger, but with a care so genuine it almost ached to watch. It wasn't just affection, it was love, and it undid something inside her. She stepped into the room. Eli turned immediately, rising to his feet as though caught somewhere he shouldn't be. "She's okay," he said gently. She just slipped in the hallway. I was nearby delivering files to the office and saw her fall. It wasn't serious, but I thought someone should stay with her until help came." Natalie nodded, her throat tight, words stuck. Sophie stirred, her lashes fluttering. Her small hand reached again for Eli's. "Don't go," she whispered. Natalie looked from her daughter to the man standing uncertainly beside the cot. Her defenses slipped. "Stay," she said softly, "at least until she wakes up fully." For several quiet minutes, they stood side by side, to people keeping watch over the little girl between them like guardians of something fragile and irreplaceable. Later that evening, with Sophie safe in bed and the adrenaline ebbing away, Natalie couldn't shake the image. Eli sitting there, the patience in his voice, the gentleness in his eyes. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't needed to be asked. He had just been there before she could second-guess herself. Natalie typed out a message. "Would you like to have dinner with us tomorrow night? Just a thank you." Her thumb hovered. "Then send." The reply came almost instantly. "I'd be honored." The next evening, Eli arrived at her apartment. His hair was neatly combed, his jacket clean but simple. In his hands, he carried a small box of homemade brownies, slightly uneven, but warm and real. Natalie met him at the door in jeans and a cream sweater. She hadn't dressed up. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she needed to. They ate takeout at the kitchen island. Sophie perched between them like a glowing link that bound them together. The conversation was easy. Light silly school stories, Eli's passionate hatred for pineapple on pizza, Sophie's dramatic retelling of her epic hallway fall. Natalie laughed, not the polite laugh she used at corporate dinners, not the restrained chuckle she offered colleagues. She laughed so hard she had to wipe tears from the corners of her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time that had happened with anyone other than Sophie. After dinner, Sophie drifted off on the couch, her head nestled in Eli's lap. He read her a picture book in a voice so soft, it seemed to hum through the room like a lullaby. Natalie stood in the kitchen doorway, watching them. Her heart ached with something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Not fear, not grief, but longing. Longing for something gentle, something steady, something real. She didn't know what. This was between her and Eli, not yet. But in that moment, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't afraid of it anymore. The evening air was cool and quiet as Natalie and Eli sat side by side on a bench just outside the city. Their walk hadn't been planned, only a mutual craving for air after a long week. With Sophie at a sleepover, Natalie didn't feel rushed to be anywhere. Something about being near Eli slowed the world down. She glanced at him. He was watching the horizon, his hands loosely laced together. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. He turned toward her. "Sure." Natalie hesitated. "What did you do before working at the company?" A pause, then a slow breath. "I was a firefighter." She turned, surprised. "Almost 10 years. Station 23, search and rescue. Why did you leave?" Eli's hands tightened slightly, his jaw setting. His voice dropped low. "There was a fire. 7 years ago. Apartment building downtown. My little brother Micah, he had just joined the department. He was 20. He took a long breath. There was a kid trapped on the second floor. Smoke everywhere. Roof creaking. I told Micah to fall back, that I'd go, but he didn't listen. His voice cracked. He went right, I went left. I got the kid. When I came back, the floor had collapsed." Natalie didn't move. She could feel each word pressing heavy between them. "They pulled us both out," Eli whispered. "Micah didn't make it. I did." The silence that followed stretched long, raw, unbroken. "I never went back," Eli said finally. "Not officially. I just stopped showing up. I couldn't wear the uniform anymore." Natalie reached out and touched his arm gently. "I'm so sorry. I'm not telling you this for sympathy," Eli said quietly. "I just didn't want you to think I've always been the janitor. I never thought that," she answered softly. He gave a weary, almost self-conscious smile. "I don't really know who I am anymore. Just someone who didn't want to keep pretending to be brave." Natalie's chest tightened. She had always seen him as steady, kind, but now she saw something deeper. Someone broken, yes, but not defeated. Someone who carried grief like a shadow and still found the strength to be gentle. And to her, that was braver than anything. A quiet ache lingered between them, still carrying the weight of a past he could never quite escape. Natalie wanted to speak, but her mind slipped away, pulled sharply backward. 5 years ago, metal twisting, flames licking at the edges, smoke so thick she could hardly breathe, the world upside down, her body trapped, Sophie screaming in the back seat, panic, the sharp scent of gas, the rising heat, and then strong, steady hands tearing open the passenger door, dragging her out. She had cried out when the man went back for Sophie, begged him not to, but he went anyway. Moments later he returned, her baby cradled safely in his arms. She never forgot his face, just a glimpse, lit by firelight. By the time help arrived, he was gone. A stranger, some had said, a miracle, others called him. Now, sitting beside Eli, Natalie's gaze fell to his hands, quiet, still, resting in his lap, and on his left one, just above the knuckle, a pale scar, small, but achingly familiar. Her breath caught, but she said nothing. That night at home, she pulled out her sketchbook. Slowly, carefully, her pencil traced the memory, smoke curling around a wrecked car, a man running from the flames with a child in his arms, and on his hand, the scar. The next afternoon, sunlight spilled across her desk as she slid the drawing toward Eli. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought you might want to see this." Eli froze. His eyes fell to the sketcher man pulling a woman and child from a burning car, a stuffed bear clutched in the little one's arms. The man's face lost in shadow, but on his hand, his mark. His fingers hovered, almost afraid to touch. His expression shifted: shock, grief, recognition. "I never thought I'd see you two again," he whispered. Natalie's eyes filled. "It was you." He nodded once. No denial, no evasion, just truth. "You saved us." Eli's voice was rough, unsteady. "I wasn't a firefighter anymore. I'd quit after Micah died. I swore I'd never run toward fire again. But that night, walking home from a late shift, I heard the crash. I smelled the gas. I told myself it wasn't my job anymore. That I'd already failed once. That I couldn't save anyone." He swallowed hard, hands trembling. "But then I remembered my brother." Eli's voice was low, steady but raw. "I ran into that house because a child was trapped. My brother never came back out. I remembered what it felt like to be too late. I couldn't let that happen again." He looked at her, eyes heavy with memory. "I got the door open, pulled you out. You were unconscious. Then I heard crying. I went back for her. I carried Sophie as far as I could before the car went up." Natalie's hand flew to her mouth, tears burning her eyes. "I remember waking up on the pavement. The sky was red, my ears ringing. Someone was holding my hand, telling me I'd be okay." Eli nodded. "That was me." Her tears spilled freely. "I looked for you. After I recovered, no name, no report. You were just gone. I left," he said softly. "Right after the paramedics arrived. I didn't want attention. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just couldn't watch another flame take someone I might save." Natalie's throat tightened. Her voice trembled. "You saved Sophie and me. I owe you everything." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. That night wasn't about debt. It was about doing what was right." Her gaze flicked to the sketch between them, then back to him. "But I want to know you, not just the man who pulled us from fire, the man you are." Eli didn't answer right away. The truth lay between them like the drawing, fragile, undeniable. Finally, he said, "I never expected this. I didn't know the woman in that car would be the one running a corner office, or that your daughter would hug me like I mattered." Natalie's smile trembled through her tears. "You do matter." His eyes softened as they returned to the drawing. "I buried it all, but that night reminded me even broken, I could still protect, still care." He lifted his gaze to hers. "Steady now. I didn't just save your life, you saved mine too." Silence fell, not heavyful, a silence thick with the things they didn't need to say. Natalie reached across the table, laying her hand over his. "Thank you for not walking away." Slowly, Eli turned his palm upward, lacing his fingers through hers. They sat that way for a long while. No more shadows, no more secrets, just truth and something beginning. 2 nights later, the ballroom of the Marlowe Hotel glittered like the cover of a magazine. Golden light spilled from crystal glasses clinked, cameras flashed, and reporters in tuxedos and silk gowns buzzed between tables. It was the city's most anticipated event. Natalie Rowan being honored as Woman of the Year. She stood near the stage in an emerald gown, her hair swept into a glossy, elegant style, composed, radiant, every movement precise. She smiled when expected, posed for photographs, accepted congratulations with graceful ease, but inside, her thoughts were elsewhere. It had been 2 days since she last saw Eli, not since the sketch, not since the truth had cracked something open between them. Natalie had meant to call, to see him, to say more, but the tide of press meetings, interviews, and dress fittings pulled her away, and now here she was, celebrated, photographed, envied, and hollow. Her clutch buzzed. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the name, Sophie. First a text, then a call. Natalie stepped out into a quiet corridor, pressing the phone to her ear. Sophie, her daughter's voice trembled, breathless. "Mom, it's Uncle Eli. He's in the hospital." Natalie's heart seized. What happened? He was at the warehouse near school. There was smoke. A little girl got trapped. He ran in and got her out, but he got hurt. Sophie sniffled. Natalie didn't hesitate. Not for the stage, not for the cameras. She shoved the phone back into her purse, grabbed her coat, and ran into the night. Rain lashed down in icy sheets by the time she reached the hospital. Her heels struck the tile in sharp, frantic echoes. "Eli Mercer," she gasped at the desk. "What room?" 204. She pushed through the door. Eli lay on the bed, his arm and shoulder bandaged, pale against the white sheets. The faint drip of an IV hummed beside him. Natalie moved to his side, sat down, and gently wrapped her hand around his. Warm, familiar. A sob broke free before she could swallow it. His eyes fluttered open. He blinked, struggling to focus. "Natalie." She shook her head, tears brimming. "Why do you keep running into fires, Eli?" His lips tugged at the ghost of a smile. "Bad habit." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You could have died. You were supposed to stay safe." "Stay here, I didn't think," he whispered. She was crying for help. "I couldn't, I know." Her voice was soft, but certain. "It's who you are." Silence fell. The monitors beeped. Rain tapped against the window. Natalie leaned in, pressing her forehead gently against his. Her voice was barely a breath. "You can keep hiding from the world if you have to. You can keep your walls, your distance. But please, Eli, don't hide from me." His eyes closed. He let the words sink in. Slowly, his uninjured hand rose, brushing her cheek with a tenderness that undid her. "I'm not afraid of fire," he murmured, "but I've been afraid of this evening someone again." Natalie nodded through her tears. "So have I." They stayed like that, forehead to forehead, hand in hand, not speaking, not moving, just breathing, until the storm outside quieted, leaving only the undeniable rhythm of two hearts finally beating in sync. 2 weeks passed. Eli was back at work, though only part-time while his burns healed. The cleaning cart rolled beside him again, but something was different. Not in what he did, but in how he carried himself. He smiled, more not out of courtesy, but with genuine, unguarded warmth. People noticed. The security guard gave him extra nods. The receptionist left a peppermint candy with a sticky note. "Welcome back, hero." But it was Natalie who noticed most. She no longer avoided his presence or forced herself to look away. Now, her eyes lingered when he passed. A glance held too long, a smile that carried meaning, a pause in the hallway that stretched just enough to say, "I see you." Sophie, of course, was overjoyed. During Eli's hospital stay, she had drawn him dozens of picture-stick figures of him saving the day, hearts in pink and purple crayon, even one with a crown labeled, "King Eli of Kindness." But it was the letter she wrote the following Monday that shifted everything. Natalie found it by accident, folded neatly beside Sophie's lunchbox. Expecting another doodle, she opened it to find her daughter's handwriting. "Dear Uncle Eli, if Mommy doesn't have a boyfriend yet, can you be my daddy? I think you'd be really good at it. Love." Sophie. Natalie froze. Her fingers trembled as heat rose in her cheeks. 1,000 feelings rushed through her: surprise, embarrassment, disbelief. But beneath it all pulsed something quieter, something deeper: hope. That afternoon she slipped the letter into her purse. The next day she handed it to Eli without a word. He opened it carefully, read the note, and when he looked back up, his expression had changed. Softer, brighter. For the first time, he looked at her not with hesitation, but with possibility. "I guess," he said gently, tucking the note into his chest pocket, "I have some very important shoes to fill." Natalie laughed, not nervous, not guarded, open. A few nights later, she invited him to dinner. Nothing extravagant, just pasta, garlic bread, and soft jazz playing in the background. Sophie set the table herself, carefully folding the napkins into perfect triangles. Then proudly insisted, Eli sit next to her. The laughter that filled the room that night was the kind Natalie hadn't heard in years. Not forced, not fleeting, but full, like the sound of a home becoming whole again. Not forced, not careful, just natural. After dessert, Sophie tugged Eli's hand, pulling him down the hallway near the laundry room. "Come see what I made," she said, grinning ear to ear. On the drywall Natalie had put up during renovations, Sophie had gone wild with markers and finger paints. A family, 3 stick figures, a tall man holding a mop in one hand and a heart in the other, a woman with long blonde hair carrying flowers, and a little girl in the middle clutching both their hands. Above them, in bold blue crayon, it read, "Our Real Family." Natalie stood frozen in the doorway, her breath caught. Eli stared at the drawing for a long moment, then he crouched beside Sophie. "That's a pretty amazing family you drew," he said gently. Sophie nodded proudly. "It's us." He turned then, meeting Natalie's gaze, and in that moment, for the first time since the fire, since the silence, since everything he thought had broken him, Ellie didn't look like a man hiding. He looked like a man finally ready to belong. The scent of cinnamon and pine drifted through the apartment, mingling with laughter and the quiet clink of silverware. The kitchen was small, but the warmth that filled it made it feel endless. Natalie stood by the stove in a holiday apron, her smile one that had taken years to return. Sophie perched on a stool, humming as she placed marshmallows carefully onto mugs of cocoa. Eli sat at the table, sleeves rolled up, slicing fresh bread. His hands were scarred, but steady now. Dinner was simple: roasted chicken, vegetables, warm rolls, and chocolate cakes Sophie had helped bake. No candles, no elaborate settings, just the 3 of them gathered as though they had always belonged. They talked, they laughed. Sophie told a joke that made no sense, but had them both doubled over in stitches. The fire crackled softly in the corner, throwing golden light onto the little tree they'd decorated together earlier that week. After the dishes were cleared, Natalie returned to the table carrying a small box, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. She set it in front of Eli. He looked at her, surprised. "What's this?" "Open it," she said softly. He untied the twine slowly, unfolding the paper with a reverence he hadn't realized he still had in him. Inside was a metal keychain, blackened, dented, partially melted. He froze, his breath caught. "I thought I lost this," he whispered. "You did," Natalie replied gently. "5 years ago, the night you pulled me from the wreck, it fell from your pocket. I found it on the ground beside the car." Eli stared at the object in his palm. A charred fireman's helmet charm clung stubbornly to the ring, its edges warped from heat. His throat tightened. Memories pressed in his brother, the fire, the night he swore he'd never run into flames again. Yet here it was, a piece of him he thought had burned away forever, returned by the very woman whose life he'd saved. It had once belonged to his brother. Eli's throat tightened as the memories rose. "I've kept it all these years," Natalie continued, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Not because I knew it was yours, but because I knew it meant someone risked everything to save me and my daughter." Eli's eyes grew glassy as he stared at the charred keychain in his hand. Natalie stepped closer, her voice trembling now. "I didn't know it was you back then, but something in me couldn't let it go." She reached for his hand, pressing hers gently over his, her gaze locked on his. "You're not just the janitor, Eli. You're the man who carried us out of the fire, the man who gave me and Sophie a second chance without asking for anything in return." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, he rose and pulled her into his arms. Natalie held on tightly, her face pressed against his chest, her eyes fluttering closed. Not because she was hiding, but because, finally, she was home. Sophie slid down from her stool and ran to them, wrapping her little arms around their legs. 3 hearts beating together, one family. Later that night, they stood before the Christmas tree, its lights twinkling softly, wrapping the room in a forgiving glow. Natalie looked up at Eli. He looked down at her. "No more walls, no more hiding," she whispered. "Just truth, just love." Sophie reached out and clasped both their hands. "This is the best Christmas ever," she whispered with a smile. Natalie's eyes glistened as she turned to Eli. "You gave us that." But Eli shook his head, tears spilling as he answered, "No, you both saved me." Outside, snow drifted down, slow and silent. Inside, all was whole, all was safe. And as the camera pulled back from the glowing window, their silhouettes wrapped in each other's arms, a gentle narration filled the air. You never really know who walks the quiet hallways of your life. Maybe it's the one who once carried you from the flames. Maybe it's the one who will love you forever. Thank you for watching. If Natalie and Eli's story touched your heart even just a little, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe,